First contact. The vast emptiness of space stretched before Captain Elara Vance as she stood on the bridge of the horizon, Earth's most advanced exploration vessel. Her dark eyes, flecked with gold, scanned the holographic displays surrounding her, each one a window into the unknown reaches of the galaxy. "Captain," called out Lieutenant Ravi Sharma from his station, his voice cutting through the low hum of the ship's systems. "We're picking up an unusual signal. It's faint, but it doesn't match any known patterns in our database." Elara's eyebrow arched with interest. "Origin?" Ravi's fingers danced across his console. "It's coming from a planet in an uncharted system, about 2 light years from our current position. The signal, it appears to be a distress call." A ripple of excitement passed through the bridge crew. First contact protocol had been drilled into them countless times, but the reality that happening sent a collective shiver down their spines. "Plot a course, Lieutenant," Elara commanded, her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. "Let's see what we're dealing with." As the horizon altered its trajectory, Elara called a briefing with her senior staff. The ship's AIA, projected a holographic image of the planet at the center of the conference table. "The planet appears to be Earth-like," AIA's soothing voice explained. "Gravity is 1.2 times that of Earth. Atmosphere is breathable, but with higher oxygen content. There are signs of advanced civilization, but also indications of recent large-scale disasters." Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the ship's xenobiologist, leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with curiosity. "Any life signs?" "Affirmative," AIA replied, "but they are erratic and seem to be diminishing rapidly." Elara's jaw tightened. Whatever was happening on that planet, it wasn't good. "Prepare for first contact and potential emergency response. We go in ready for anything." As the horizon entered the planet's orbit, the true scale of the situation became apparent. The continents were dotted with gleaming cities that put Earth's most advanced metropolises to shame. But interspersed among them were vast areas of darkness, entire regions seemingly devoid of power or activity. "We're being hailed," Ravi announced, his voice tinged with awe. Elara nodded, steeling herself. On screen. The view screen flickered to life, revealing a creature unlike anything the crew had ever seen. It was tall and slender, with iridescent skin that seemed to shimmer with every movement. Its large, almond-shaped eyes were a deep violet, filled with an intelligence that was undeniable. "Greetings, travelers," the alien spoke, its voice melodious yet underlined with urgency. "I am Zix, chief coordinator of the Zaraxian Collective. We are in dire need of assistance." Elara stepped forward, her posture straight and confident. "I am Captain Elara Vance of the Earth vessel Horizon. We received your distress call and came to offer aid. What's the nature of your emergency?" Zix's features contorted in what Elara interpreted as a mix of relief and despair. "A plague, Captain. A plague unlike anything we've ever encountered. It's ravaging our population, and our most brilliant minds are powerless to stop it." Dr. Tanaka gasped softly behind Elara. The captain maintained her composure, but her mind raced with the implications. A technologically superior species brought to its knees by disease. The echoes of humanity's own history were not lost on her. "We're prepared to offer whatever assistance we can," Elara said, her voice firm with resolve. "With your permission, I'd like to bring a team to the surface to assess the situation firsthand." Zix seemed to hesitate for a moment, its shimmering form rippling with what might have been anxiety. "We welcome your aid, Captain, but I must warn you, we don't know if this plague affects your species. The risk." Elara cut him off gently but firmly. "With all due respect, Zix, taking risks to help those in need is a fundamental part of who we are as humans. We'll take all necessary precautions, but we're coming down there." For the first time, a flicker of hope seemed to pass across Zix's alien features. "Very well, Captain. We'll transmit coordinates for a safe landing zone. And thank you. As the transmission ended, Ilara turned to her crew. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air. They were about to step into unknown territory, facing an invisible enemy that had brought a superior civilization to its knees. Dr. Tanaka, assemble your medical team. Lieutenant Sharma, you're with me. We'll take a shuttle down with a security detail. Her eyes swept across the faces of her crew, seeing determination reflected back at her. I don't need to tell you the gravity of this situation. We're not just representing humanity here, we're embodying the very best of what we can be. Whatever happens down there, we face it together. As the team prepared for descent, Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the precipice of something monumental. Humanity had long wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now, not only had they found their answer, but they were about to be thrust into a crisis that would test the very essence of what it meant to be human. The shuttle bay doors opened, revealing the alien world below. With a deep breath, Ilara gave the order to launch. As they descended through the atmosphere, she silently vowed to do whatever it took to save this dying civilization. Little did she know, the actions they were about to take would send ripples across the galaxy, forever changing the course of both human and Zyraxian history. The first chapter of humanity's greatest adventure was about to begin. The human touch. The shuttle touched down in a clearing on the outskirts of a sprawling Zyraxian city. As the doors hissed open, Captain Ilara Vance and her team stepped out onto alien soil, their environmental suits gleaming in the light of twin suns. The air shimmered with an otherworldly haze, and in the distance, the spires of the city stretched impossibly high, their iridescent surfaces reflecting a kaleidoscope of colors. Dr. Yuki Tanaka's voice crackled over the comm. Atmospheric readings are stable, Captain. Oxygen levels are high, but within tolerable limits for humans. No immediate signs of airborne pathogens, but I recommend we keep our suits on until we can do more thorough testing. Ilara nodded, her eyes scanning the horizon. Agreed. Stay alert, everyone. We don't know what we're walking into. As if on cue, a group of Zyraxians approached. Their movements were graceful yet cautious, and Ilara couldn't help but notice the fear in their large, expressive eyes. At the forefront was Zix, recognizable from their earlier communication. Welcome to Zyraxa, Captain Vance, Zix said, his melodious voice tinged with a mixture of hope and apprehension. We cannot express our gratitude for your willingness to help. Ilara stepped forward, her posture open and non-threatening. We're here to help in any way we can, Zix. Can you take us to your medical facilities? We need to understand what we're dealing with. As they made their way through the city, the true scale of the crisis became apparent. The streets were eerily empty, and those Zyraxians they did see moved with a sluggishness that spoke of a deep, pervasive illness. Holographic warnings flickered on every corner, displaying information about quarantine zones and emergency protocols. In the central medical complex, a cavernous structure that seemed to defy the laws of physics, Dr. Tanaka and her team immediately set to work. They pored over Zyraxian medical data, their expressions growing increasingly grim as they began to understand the nature of the plague. It's unlike anything I've ever seen, Dr. Tanaka explained during a briefing hours later. The plague attacks the Zyraxian cellular structure at a fundamental level. It's as if their very DNA is being rewritten. Lieutenant Sharma frowned, his dark brows furrowed in concentration. Could it be a bioweapon? Zix, who had been listening silently, shook his head. We thought so at first, but we found no evidence of artificial engineering. This plague, it's as if our planet itself has turned against us. Ilara leaned forward, her eyes intense. What about treatment options? Surely with your level of technology. We've tried everything, Zix interrupted, his voice heavy with despair. Our most advanced nanites, our most powerful genetic therapies. Nothing works. The plague adapts faster than we can counter it. A heavy silence fell over the room. The weight of an entire civilization's fate pressed down on them all. It was Dr. Tanaka who finally broke the silence, her voice quiet but filled with determination. Captain, I'd like to run some tests. On us. Ilara raised an eyebrow. Explain. Well, we've been exposed to the planet's atmosphere for hours now, even if it's been through our suits. If the plague affects humans, we should be showing at least some signs of infection. But we're not. I want to know why. The implications hung in the air. Could human biology hold the key to fighting this plague? The Xeraxians in the room stirred, a ripple of something like hope passing through them. Ilara nodded sharply. Do it, whatever you need. What followed was a flurry of activity as human and Xeraxian scientists worked side by side. Cultural barriers fell away in the face of their shared goal. The humans marveled at the advanced Xeraxian technology, while the Xeraxians were impressed by the intuitive leaps and out-of-the-box thinking their human counterparts displayed. Days passed in a blur of tests, theories, and cautious optimism. It was during one of these marathon research sessions that Dr. Tanaka made a breakthrough. It's our cellular structure, she explained, her eyes bright with excitement despite her obvious exhaustion. Human cells have a remarkable ability to adapt to environmental stressors. It's not that we're immune to the plague, it's that our bodies are adapting to it faster than it can harm us. Six leaned in, his iridescent skin pulsing with what the humans had come to recognize as intense emotion. Can this be applied to Xeraxian physiology? Dr. Tanaka hesitated. Possibly, but it would require significant alterations to your cellular structure. We'd essentially be using human biology as a template to rebuild Xeraxian resistance. The implications were staggering. They weren't just talking about a cure anymore, but a fundamental change to Xeraxian biology. The ethical implications alone were mind-boggling. Ilara stood, her decision made. We need to attempt it. The stakes are too high not to try. As the humans and Xeraxians set to work on this new approach, a palpable sense of hope began to spread through the city. News of the potential cure raced through Xeraxian communication networks, reaching even the most remote colonies. But with hope came new challenges. Some Xeraxians, particularly those in positions of power, began to voice concerns about the implications of using human biology as a basis for the cure. They feared a loss of Xeraxian identity, a fundamental change to their very nature. Tensions rose as debates raged across the planet. The humans found themselves at the center of a cultural and philosophical storm they barely understood. Ilara and her team worked tirelessly, not just on the cure, but on building bridges of understanding between their two species. As the first trials of the human-based cure began, Ilara stood at a window overlooking the Xeraxian capital. The fate of an entire civilization hung in the balance, and humanity's actions here would echo across the stars for generations to come. She thought of Earth, so far away, unaware of the monumental events unfolding on this distant world. Humanity had always dreamed of making its mark on the universe. Now, in ways they could never have imagined, they were about to do just that. A heady silence fell over the room. The weight of an entire civilization's fate pressed down on them all. It was Dr. Tanaka who finally broke the silence, her voice quiet but filled with determination. Captain, I'd like to run some tests. On us. Ilara raised an eyebrow. Explain. Well, we've been exposed to the planet's atmosphere for hours now, even if it's been through our suits. If the plague affects humans, we should be showing at least some signs of infection. But we're not. I want to know why. The implications hung in the air. Could human biology hold the key to fighting this plague? The Xeraxians in the room stirred, a ripple of something like hope passing through them. Ilara nodded sharply. Do it, whatever you need. What followed was a flurry of activity as human and Xeraxian scientists worked side by side. Cultural barriers fell away in the face of their shared goal. The humans marveled at the advanced Xeraxian technology, while the Xeraxians were impressed by the intuitive leaps and out-of-the-box thinking their human counterparts displayed. Days passed in a blur of tests, theories, and cautious optimism. It was during one of these marathon research sessions that Dr. Tanaka made a breakthrough. It's our cellular structure, she explained, her eyes bright with excitement despite her obvious exhaustion. Human cells have a remarkable ability to adapt to environmental stressors. It's not that we're immune to the plague, it's that our bodies are adapting to it faster than it can harm us. Zix leaned in, his iridescent skin pulsing with what the humans had come to recognize as intense emotion. Can this be applied to Xeraxian physiology? Dr. Tanaka hesitated. Possibly, but it would require significant alterations to your cellular structure. We'd essentially be using human biology as a template to rebuild Xeraxian resistance. The implications were staggering. They weren't just talking about a cure anymore, but a fundamental change to Xeraxian biology. The ethical implications alone were mind-boggling. Ilara stood, her decision made. We need to attempt it. The stakes are too high not to try. As the humans and Xeraxians set to work on this new approach, a palpable sense of hope began to spread through the city. News of the potential cure raced through Xeraxian communication networks, reaching even the most remote colonies. But with hope came new challenges. Some Xeraxians, particularly those in positions of power, began to voice concerns about the implications of using human biology as a basis for the cure. They feared a loss of Xeraxian identity, a fundamental change to their very nature. Tensions rose as debates raged across the planet. The humans found themselves at the center of a cultural and philosophical storm they barely understood. Ilara and her team worked tirelessly, not just on the cure, but on building bridges of understanding between their two species. As the first trials of the human-based cure began, Ilara stood at a window overlooking the Xeraxian capital. The fate of an entire civilization hung in the balance, and humanity's actions here would echo across the stars for generations to come. She thought of Earth, so far away, unaware of the monumental events unfolding on this distant world. Humanity had always dreamed of making its mark on the universe. Now, in ways they could never have imagined, they were about to do just that. The true test was yet to come, and Ilara knew that the challenges ahead would push both humans and Xeraxians to their limits. But as she watched the twin suns set on this alien world, she felt a surge of determination. Whatever came next, they would face it together, two species united in the face of adversity. The next phase of their journey was about to begin, and the universe would never be the same. The true test was yet to come, and Ilara knew that the challenges ahead would push both humans and Xeraxians to their limits. But as she watched the twin suns set on this alien world, she felt a surge of determination. Whatever came next, they would face it together, two species united in the face of adversity. The next phase of their journey was about to begin, and the universe would never be the same. Race against time. The Xeraxian research facility hummed with activity, a stark contrast to the eerie quiet that had fallen over much of the planet. Human and Xeraxian scientists worked side by side, their differences forgotten in the face of their monumental task. At the center of it all stood Captain Ilara Vance, her eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the latest test results. "Talk to me, Dr. Tanaka," Ilara said, her voice tense. "How close are we?" Dr. Yuki Tanaka looked up from her workstation, dark circles under her eyes betraying her exhaustion. "We're making progress, Captain. The human-based treatment is showing promising results in our simulations." But she hesitated. "But what?" Ilara pressed. "But we're running out of time," Dr. Tanaka finished. "The plague is mutating faster than we anticipated. If we don't find a workable solution soon..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. They all knew what was at stake. Just then, an alarm blared through the facility. Red lights flashed as security protocols activated. Lieutenant Ravi Sharma's voice crackled over the comm system. "Captain, we have a situation. A group of Xeraxian isolationists has breached the perimeter. They're trying to sabotage the research." Ilara's mind raced. They'd known about the isolationist faction, Xeraxians who opposed any form of human intervention, but she hadn't expected them to resort to violence. "Lock down the lab," Ilara ordered. "Ravi, coordinate with Xeraxian security. We need to protect this research at all costs. As chaos erupted around them, Ilara turned to Zix, who had been overseeing the Xeraxian side of the research. Your people really willing to doom themselves over fear of change? Zix's iridescent skin pulsed with what Ilara had come to recognize as distress. You must understand, Captain. Our species has remained unchanged for millennia. The idea of fundamentally altering our biology, for some it's unthinkable. A crash echoed from somewhere in the facility. The isolationists were getting closer. Well, they better start thinking about it, Ilara muttered. Because the alternative is extinction. As security forces engaged the intruders, Ilara and the core research team worked frantically to secure their data. They couldn't risk losing months of work, not when they were so close to a breakthrough. In the midst of the chaos, Dr. Tanaka's eyes suddenly widened. Captain, I think I found something. Ilara rushed to the side, adrenaline coursing through her veins. What is it? Dr. Tanaka's fingers flew over her console. The latest simulation, it's showing a 98% success rate. If we combine the human adaptive cellular structure with a modified version of the Xeraxian genetic repair mechanism. In English, Dr. Ilara pressed. We can create a cure, Dr. Tanaka said, her voice filled with awe. One that doesn't just fight the plague, but enhances the Xeraxian immune system to prevent future mutations. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just a cure, it was a fundamental upgrade to Xeraxian biology. Before they could celebrate, another explosion rocked the facility. The isolationists had breached the inner security perimeter. We need to buy time, Ilara said, her mind racing. She turned to Ravi. Lieutenant, how long can you hold them off? Ravi's face was grim. Not long enough, Captain. We're outnumbered. Ilara's eyes swept the lab, taking in the advanced Xeraxian technology. An idea began to form. Zix, your atmospheric control systems. Can they be repurposed to deliver an airborne agent throughout the facility? Zix's eyes widened in understanding. Yes, but you're not suggesting. We don't have a choice, Ilara said firmly. We need to synthesize the cure and disperse it now. It's our only chance. What followed was a frenzy of activity. Human ingenuity combined with Xeraxian technology in ways neither species had thought possible. They repurposed medical synthesizers, rewrote delivery protocols, and pushed both themselves and their equipment to the limit. As the sounds of fighting grew closer, Dr. Tanaka looked up from the final synthesis. It's ready, but Captain, we haven't had time to test it properly. The risk. Ilara met her gaze steadily. The risk of doing nothing is greater. Do it. With a nod, Dr. Tanaka activated the delivery system. A fine mist began to permeate the air, spreading rapidly through the facility's ventilation system. For a moment, everything seemed to pause. The fighting outside the lab quieted. Then, slowly, change began to ripple through the Xeraxians present. Zix gasped, his iridescent skin glowing with newfound vitality. I can feel it. The plague, it's retreating. But the change was more than just the curing of the plague. The Xeraxians in the room began to exhibit subtle but noticeable alterations. Their movements became more fluid, their eyes more expressive. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing a new dimension to their beings. As the isolationists burst into the lab, weapons raised, they too succumbed to the effects of the cure. Confusion replaced hostility as they experienced the change sweeping through them. Ilara stepped forward, her voice ringing with authority. The cure has been dispersed. The plague is over. But more than that, you've been given a gift. Human resilience, combined with Xeraxian ingenuity. You're evolving. The isolationists lowered their weapons, shock and awe replacing their earlier rage. One of them, presumably their leader, stepped forward. What have you done to us? It was Zix who answered, his voice filled with wonder. They saved us, and they've given us the ability to save ourselves in the future. As the reality of what had happened sank in, a new challenge emerged. The cure was spreading rapidly across the planet, carried by wind currents and Xeraxian transit systems. Reports flooded in from across Xeraxa of plague symptoms disappearing, replaced by unprecedented vitality. But with this miraculous cure came questions and fears. How would this change affect Xeraxian society? What would it mean for their future as a species? As the twin suns set on a day that had changed the course of two civilizations, Ilara knew that their work was far from over. They had won the battle against the plague, but the challenge of guiding the Xeraxians through this transformation was just beginning. She looked out over the Xeraxian capital, its spires now glowing with renewed energy. Humanity had come seeking first contact, and instead, they had become the architects of a new era for an alien civilization. The universe, Ilara realized, would never be the same, and neither would humanity's place in it. The human element. The days following the dispersal of the cure were a whirlwind of activity and emotion. Captain Ilara Vance stood in the newly established Joint Human Xeraxian Command Center, watching as reports flooded in from across the planet. The plague was retreating at an astonishing rate, but with each passing hour, it became clear that the cure had far-reaching consequences beyond what anyone had anticipated. Captain, Dr. Yuki Tanaka called, her voice tense. "You need to see this." Ilara made her way to the doctor's workstation, where a holographic display showed a dizzying array of genetic data. "What am I looking at, Doctor?" Dr. Tanaka's fingers danced across the controls, zooming in on specific sequences. The cure isn't just eliminating the plague. It's rewriting Xeraxian DNA at a fundamental level. They're not just becoming immune to the plague, they're evolving. The implications hit Ilara like a physical blow. They hadn't just cured a disease, they had irreversibly altered an entire species. The weight of that responsibility threatened to overwhelm her. "How significant are these changes?" Ilara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Before Dr. Tanaka could respond, Zix entered the command center, his movements more fluid and purposeful than Ilara had ever seen. "Significant enough, Captain," he said, his melodious voice tinged with a new depth of emotion. "We are changing, in ways we're only beginning to understand." Reports were coming in from across Xeraxa of Xeraxians, developing heightened emotional responses, increased physical resilience, and even the beginnings of new cognitive abilities. The cure, infused with human DNA, was pushing Xeraxian evolution into overdrive. As the scope of the changes became clear, the initial euphoria of surviving the plague gave way to fear and uncertainty. The Xeraxian government, already fragile from the plague crisis, now faced the monumental task of guiding their species through an unprecedented transformation. Ilara found herself at the center of a storm of ethical debates and political maneuvering. The human crew of the Horizon, once hailed as saviors, now faced accusations of playing God with an alien species. In a tense meeting with the Xeraxian High Council, Ilara faced the full brunt of their fear and anger. "You had no right." Councillor Vex thundered, his iridescent skin pulsing with rage. "You've altered the very essence of what it means to be Xeraxian." Ilara stood her ground, her voice steady. "We did what was necessary to save your species from extinction. The alternative was to let you die. Perhaps that would have been preferable to becoming this," Vex spat, gesturing to himself. "We are becoming more like you, losing what makes us Xeraxian." It was Zix who stepped forward, his newly expressive eyes filled with a mixture of wonder and determination. "Are we, Councillor? Or are we becoming more of what we always had the potential to be? I feel more alive, more connected to our world and to each other than ever before. Is that not the essence of being Xeraxian?" The debate raged on, not just in the council chambers, but across the planet. Xeraxian society was fracturing along new lines, those who embraced the change and those who feared it. Amidst the chaos, Ilara and her crew worked tirelessly to understand and mitigate the effects of the cure. They set up clinics to help Xeraxians cope with their new emotional range, established research centers to study the ongoing genetic changes, and worked with Xeraxian leaders to develop new social structures to accommodate their evolving needs. But as they worked, a new crisis loomed. Dr. Tanaka's latest findings sent shockwaves through both human and Xeraxian communities. The changes aren't stopping, she explained in a somber briefing. The human DNA in the cure, it's continuing to integrate with Xeraxian genetics. At this rate, within a few generations, the Xeraxians will be, well, more human than Xeraxian. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They hadn't just cured a plague, they had set in motion the transformation of an entire species. Ilara felt the weight of galaxies on her shoulders. Options, people, I need options. Lieutenant Ravi Sharma spoke up, his voice thoughtful. What if we could find a way to stabilize the changes, lock in the beneficial adaptations without pushing further towards human genetics? Dr. Tanaka nodded slowly. It's possible, but it would require a level of genetic engineering far beyond anything we've ever attempted. We'd be walking a razor's edge between saving the Xeraxians and fundamentally altering them. Zix, who had been listening intently, stepped forward. Whatever you decide, it must be our choice. The Xeraxian people must have a say in their own evolution. Ilara nodded, a plan forming in her mind. We'll present the facts to your people. All of them. The benefits, the risks, everything. Let them decide their own fate. What followed was an unprecedented planetary referendum. Every Xeraxian was given access to all available information about their changing biology and the options before them. Debates raged in every corner of the planet, from the highest spires of the capital to the most remote colonies. As the Xeraxians grappled with their choice, Ilara and her crew faced their own ethical dilemma. How much should they intervene? Where was the line between assistance and interference? In a quiet moment amidst the chaos, Ilara stood with Zix, watching the twin suns set over the Xeraxian capital. No matter what your people choose, Ilara said softly, know that humanity will stand with you. We started this journey together. We'll see it through together. Zix turned to her, his eyes shimmering with an emotion that would have been impossible for him just weeks ago. You've given us more than a cure, Captain. You've given us a future. Whatever that future holds, it will be because of the human element you've brought to our world. As night fell on Xeraxa, the fate of two species hung in the balance. The decision the Xeraxians would make would reshape not just their world, but the future of interstellar relations and the very nature of evolution itself. Ilara knew that whatever came next, nothing would ever be the same. Humanity had taken its first steps into a larger universe, and the echoes of their actions would resonate across the cosmos for generations to come. The true test of their shared humanity, both human and Xeraxian, was yet to come. Transformation, the great hall of convergence, a vast amphitheater at the heart of the Xeraxian capital, buzzed with an energy unlike anything in the planet's history. Billions of Xeraxians across the globe watched through neural interfaces as Zix, now the appointed liaison between the Xeraxians and humanity, stepped onto the central platform. Captain Ilara Vance stood to the side, her heart racing. The results of the planetary referendum were in, and the future of an entire species hung on Zix's next words. People of Xeraxa, Zix began, his voice resonating with newfound depth and emotion. We have made our choice. By a margin of 63%, we have voted to continue our evolution, to embrace the changes brought about by the human cure. A collective gasp rippled through the hall and across the planet. Ilara felt a mixture of relief and apprehension wash over her. The Xeraxians had chosen to move forward, but the road ahead would be far from easy. Zix continued, we recognize the risks and challenges that lie ahead, but we also see the potential for growth, for a new understanding of ourselves and our place in the universe. With the help of our human allies, we will navigate this transformation together. As Zix's speech concluded, the real work began. The next few months saw a flurry of activity as human and Xeraxian scientists worked tirelessly to stabilize the genetic changes, ensuring that the beneficial adaptations were locked in while preventing further drift towards human DNA. But the challenges weren't just biological. Xeraxian society was undergoing a radical transformation. As their capacity for emotion and individual expression grew, age-old social structures began to crumble. Dr. Yuki Tanaka found herself not just studying Xeraxian biology, but helping to establish the planet's first mental health support systems. "It's fascinating," she explained to Ilara during one of their daily briefings. "They're experiencing the full spectrum of human emotions the first time. It's like watching a child grow up, but on a planetary scale." Lieutenant Ravi Sharma, meanwhile, was working with Xeraxian security forces to handle outbreaks of violence, another unfortunate human trait that had been passed along with the cure. "It's not all bad news, Captain," he reported. "Their capacity for empathy and conflict resolution is growing just as quickly. They're learning to handle these new emotions at an incredible rate." Ilara watched as the Xeraxian cities transformed before her eyes. New forms of art began to appear, vibrant and emotional in ways the formerly logic-driven Xeraxians had never conceived. Music filled the air, not the mathematical harmonies of before, but passionate, soul-stirring melodies that spoke of joy, sorrow, and everything in between. But with these beautiful changes came darker ones as well. The first Xeraxian crime of passion was recorded, sending shockwaves through a society that had never before experienced such raw, uncontrolled emotion. Political debates, once calm and logical, now rolled with fiery rhetoric and heated disagreements. Through it all, Ilara and her crew worked tirelessly, offering guidance, support, and when necessary, a calming presence. They had become more than allies to the Xeraxians. They were mentors, friends, and in some cases, family. One evening, as Ilara watched the twin suns set from the balcony of the newly established Human Xeraxian Cultural Center, Zix joined her. "How are you holding up?" Ilara asked, noticing the wariness in his eyes. Zix's skin shimmered with a complex play of colors, a new form of emotional expression the Xeraxians had developed. "It's overwhelming," he admitted. "Every day brings new joys and new challenges, but I wouldn't change it for anything." Ilara nodded, understanding all too well. "You're navigating the full complexity of the human experience in a matter of months. It's bound to be intense." Zix turned to her, his eyes filled with a gratitude that needed no words. "We owe you so much, Ilara. You've given us a new life, a new way of being. But I fear we may be losing something of ourselves in the process." Before Ilara could respond, an alarm blared across the city. Lieutenant Sharma's voice crackled over the comm. "Captain, we have a situation. A group of traditionalists have taken control of the planetary defense systems. They're threatening to use them unless we undo the changes to their people." Ilara's blood ran cold. They had always known there would be those who couldn't accept the changes, but this was beyond anything they had prepared for. "I'm on my way," she replied, already moving. She turned to Zix, seeing her own determination reflected in his eyes. "Looks like we're about to face our biggest test yet." As they raced towards the command center, Ilara's mind whirled with the implications. The transformed Xeraxians now had to face not just the challenges of their new existence, but the violent rejection of those who clung to the old ways. The next few hours would determine not just the future of Xeraxa, but the very nature of humanity's first true interstellar alliance. As the crisis unfolded, Ilara realized that the true transformation was yet to come, a crucible that would either forge an unbreakable bond between humans and Xeraxians or tear both societies apart. The echoes of humanity that had reshaped Xeraxian society were about to face their greatest challenge yet, and in facing it, both species would discover the true meaning of what it meant to be human, in all its messy, complex, beautiful glory. A new chapter. The command center of the Xeraxian planetary defense system was a maelstrom of activity as Captain Ilara Vance burst through the doors, Zix close on her heels. Holographic displays showed the unfolding crisis. A group of Zeraxian traditionalists had seized control of the planet's formidable defense grid, threatening to use it against their own people unless the effects of the human-derived cure were reversed. Status report, Ilara barked, her eyes scanning the room. Lieutenant Ravi Sharma looked up from his console, his face grim. The traditionalists have locked themselves in the main control room. They've activated the planetary shield and are threatening to turn the defense lasers on major population centers unless we comply with their demands. Dr. Yuki Tanaka stepped forward, her voice tight with urgency. Captain, even if we wanted to, there's no way to reverse the genetic changes. They've become an integral part of Zeraxian biology now. Ilara's mind raced, weighing options and potential outcomes. She turned to Zix, seeing the conflict in his expressive eyes. Your people, your call. How do you want to handle this? Zix's skin shimmered with a complex array of colors, reflecting the turmoil within. We can't give in to their demands, but we can't let them harm innocent civilians either. Perhaps we can reason with them. Ilara nodded, a plan forming. Ravi, can you get us a communication link to the control room? Already on it, Captain, Ravi replied, his fingers flying over the controls. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the leader of the traditionalists, a Zeraxian elder whose skin bore the pale, sickly hue of one resistant to the cure's effects. His eyes, lacking the newfound expressiveness of his transformed brethren, burned with a cold fury. I am Elder Vax, he announced, his voice harsh and unyielding. We demand that you undo this abomination you've inflicted upon our people. Return us to our true selves, or watch as we cleanse our world of this human taint. Ilara stepped forward, her voice calm but authoritative. Elder Vax, I'm Captain Ilara Vance. I understand your fear, but what you're asking is impossible. The changes can't be undone, but more importantly, they shouldn't be. Your people voted for this future. A future of corruption, Vax spat. You've turned us into emotional, irrational beings. We're losing everything that made us Zeraxian. It was Zix who spoke next, his voice filled with a passion that would have been impossible mere months ago. Are we elder? Or are we becoming more? I feel things I never knew existed. I see beauty in the world that was always there, but that we were blind to. We're not losing ourselves. We're finding ourselves. Vax's resolve seemed to waver for a moment, but he shook his head violently. Pretty words, but words can't undo what's been done. We'll reset our society, even if we have to burn it down first. As Vax reached for the weapons control, Ilara made a split-second decision. Ravi, now. Lieutenant Sharma's fingers danced across his console, executing a plan they had prepared but hoped never to use. Suddenly, the lights in the control room flickered, and the traditionalists cried out in shock. What's happening to me? Vax gasped, his skin beginning to shimmer with new colors. Dr. Tanaka stepped forward, her voice firm but compassionate. We've released a concentrated dose of the cure into the control room's air supply. You're experiencing the changes you've been so afraid of, Elder. Don't fight it. Let yourself feel. The next few minutes were tense as they watched the traditionalists grapple with a flood of new sensations and emotions. Vax fell to his knees, his face a mask of conflicting feelings. It's too much, he whispered, tears, a new experience for him, streaming down his face. Zix's voice was gentle as he addressed his fellow Zeraxian. It's overwhelming at first, yes, but you're not alone. We're all on this journey together. Let us help you through it. Slowly, the tension in the room dissipated. The traditionalists, overcome by their new emotions and the weight of what they had almost done, surrendered. As Zeraxian security forces moved in to secure the area, Ilara felt a wave of relief wash over her. In the days that followed, the foiled coup became a turning point for Zeraxian society. The event highlighted the need for better integration and support systems for those struggling with the changes. New programs were implemented to help Ziraxians explore and understand their evolving identities. Weeks turned into months, and months into years. The Horizon, originally sent on a short-term mission, became a permanent fixture in Ziraxian orbit. The crew, led by Captain Vance, found themselves not just observers, but active participants in the birth of a new civilization. 5 years after the cure was first administered, Ilara stood on the balcony of the Human Ziraxian Cooperative, a sprawling complex that served as the heart of the two species' joint endeavors. Beside her stood Zix, now the elected leader of the Ziraxian people. "It's amazing, isn't it?" Zix mused, gazing out at the city below. The Ziraxian capital had transformed, blending their original crystalline architecture with new, organic forms that reflected their changed nature. "We've come so far." Ilara nodded, a sense of pride and wonder filling her. "Your people have achieved in years what took humanity centuries. You've embraced change, faced your fears, and come out stronger for it." Zix turned to her, his eyes filled with an emotion that needed no words. "We couldn't have done it without you, without humanity. You've given us more than a cure. You've given us a new way of being." As they watched the twin suns set, casting the city in a warm, golden glow, Ilara reflected on the journey they had undertaken. What had started as a simple mission of first contact had become so much more. Humanity had left an indelible mark on an alien civilization, not through conquest or colonization, but through compassion, resilience, and the shared struggle for survival. The communicator on Ilara's wrist chimed, displaying a message that made her heart race with excitement. She turned to Zix, a grin spreading across her face. "The Council has approved it," she said, her voice filled with anticipation. "The joint Human-Ziraxian Deep Space Expedition. We're really doing this." Zix's skin shimmered with joy. The next great adventure. Our peoples, exploring the stars together. As night fell on Ziraxa, Ilara gazed up at the stars, knowing that somewhere out there, Earth was waiting for news of their incredible journey. The universe had proven to be more wondrous and more challenging than anyone could have imagined. But together, humans and Ziraxians had proven equal to those challenges. The echoes of humanity had transformed an alien world, and in doing so, had transformed humanity itself. As they stood on the brink of a new era of exploration and cooperation, Ilara knew that the greatest adventures and the greatest challenges still lay ahead. But whatever the cosmos had in store for them, they would face it together. Human and Ziraxian, two species united by shared experiences, shared struggles, and a shared vision of a brighter future among the stars. The end of this chapter was just the beginning of a grand new story, one that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come.